My name is Emil Rivera, and this is Echolocation podcast, a podcast in collaboration between Global Bar Magazine from Sweden, Yes from Moldova, and K News from Georgia. And today we're gonna talk about something that's always fascinated me, but that I've never really gotten into, which is sports. And with me to discuss this interesting topic, I have Anna from Moldova, Andrea from Georgia, and Estrid from Sweden. Estrid, would you want to start introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Estrid. I'm from Sweden. I am 27 years old, and now I'm a student. I study medicine. I just play sports for fun nowadays, but I'm quite a keen supporter. So I've started a supporter group for the female national football team in Sweden. We had our first big event 2019, I think, or if it was 18, 19, yeah.
What's it called, the supporter group?
Soft Hooligans. We're getting quite big now. It's a lot of fun. We make a lot of noise at the games, so it's a lot of fun.
Anna from Moldova.
So my name is Anna. I'm 17. I'm a student and an athlete from Moldova, Republic of Moldova, a very small but very beautiful country between Romania and Ukraine. I practice shooting. It's a very important Olympic sport. So the first medal on Olympic Games, on every Olympic Games, it's the medal for the women's rifle event. Yeah.
And Andrea?
I'm from Georgia. I'm 14 years old and I am a volleyball player. I play and exercise with the main team in my country.
That's very cool. Sports, as you know, can mean so much things to so many different people. But what does sport mean for you?
For me in particular, I play sports because I have a deep love for it. Sports, there is this thing that you will really enjoy, and you can just get into your mindset when you play sports. You just can really relax. If not sports, I would be a different person right now, because through sports I met some of my closest friends. Through sports I got also most of my personality. And sports has just been a main part of my life.
I totally agree. And I think the social aspect of sports has always been very, very important for me to continue with all the sports that I've started. If I found like a good friends and like a good team around the sport, it has been like a lot more likely for me to continue with that sport. And like Andrea, I have many of my closest friends from my old teams, and also from the like supporter side of it, I'm also like for me it is such a great way to get emotions out. Like it's so culturally accepted to scream, to cry, to like laugh, and just be very, very clear and vocal with your emotions. And it's a very like constructive way to kind of get the emotions out of your system. And it is also that collective, like you're in the stands with so many people that are feeling the same way as you do. And I feel like that is a very comforting place to be for me.
Nice. Anna, how do you feel?
Sports is everything. When you start to play your sport professional, when you start to compete in different competitions like cups and kind of like that, the sport turns into a much bigger thing. You start to notice that you join every single little thing in the sport that you're doing. You enjoy people around you. You enjoy yourself while competing. It's everything. Sport teaches you life. Sports gives you the experience that will help you in the future, not only while competing or while practicing, but in daily life also. And as Andrea said, if I wouldn't be an athlete, then I know that I would be anyway, but if I wouldn't be an athlete, I would be a completely different person.
Anna, do you think it's a very big difference? Have you felt a big difference from playing a sport more casually and playing more professionally?
No, of course, it's not the same. There is a very big gap, a very big difference between the professional athletes and the ones that practice sports for hobby or just to stay active. When you start to play your sport professionally, you start to compete, there appears this responsibility in front of you. You know, as in Spider-Man was said, with great power comes great responsibility. Same is here in sport. When you start to compete, it's completely different. You take responsibility on yourself, on your country, on people around you, on people who support you, on your coaches, your teammates, your parents, and so on.
But do you feel like a lot of support from home?
Yeah, I do. I always do, especially from my closest one, from the coaches, from parents, from my family, from my friends, especially from my teammates, because then they understand where I am. They get my tension, my worries, my thoughts, especially my teammates, because we're practicing the same sport. They know how it feels to be there to compete.
And Andrea, is volleyball a big sport in Georgia?
No. Actually, it's pretty sad that it doesn't get recognized, and it isn't as popular as other sports. And I feel like about volleyball, it's the same in most countries. It doesn't get as much as respect as other sports, for example, basketball or football, because in basketball and football, merch comes out. There are like lines of clothing. In football, there are also many merch for players, but in volleyball, I really cannot come up with anyone who has their own signature line in clothing. And volleyball is just something that people who enjoy playing it are the only fans of it. The only supporters you get at a volleyball game is the volleyball players themselves. For example, Kvaratskhelia is one of the biggest Georgian football players right now, and he's playing abroad for a different country. And the entire country is going crazy about it, that a Georgian football player is so successful. But in volleyball, nobody really cares about it, except of the volleyball players and enthusiasts themselves.
Is there similarities between volleyball and air pistol in that matter, Anna?
Actually, yeah, I'm pretty related to what Andrea was talking about, because Andrea was talking about Georgia only, but if we talk about shooting, I can say that the whole world doesn't have a single idea what shooting sport is. Only shooters really know what is the sport that we practice, the beauty of it. Only we understand the way it is. So it's really sad. I wish more people knew about how awesome our sport is, how interesting it can be.
So you don't have like any like supporter culture with pistol or?
Absolutely no. If we're talking seriously, then no. In comparison to other sports, especially the big one, the popular one like football, basketball, and so on, no. We get support only from our countries. If we're talking about the government, especially our Olympic committees, our federations, from our coaches, our teammates. But if you're talking about a whole support group, then no, I don't think there is something like that.
Is that something you want to have? If you could like dream?
I don't think that that it is like necessary. But of course, every athlete will love support from a big group of people. It makes you feel that your sport matters and what you're doing matters.
We can take a quick round and talk about which sports, if not volleyball and not pistol, which sports are big in our 3 different countries?
It's mostly basketball and football. Like those are the 2 biggest sports. Because I don't know why, but those just get the most hype, and those are just the most popular out of them all. Volleyball is still decently high up there, but it's just not as popular and doesn't get as much as respect as those others do.
I think it's also besides football and volleyball, obviously, we can talk about baseball, hockey, Formula One. And also, I think there are a few others that we can add to this list, but these are the ones that I can think of.
In Sweden, it's for sure football first, and then ice hockey. With basketball is really a small sport in Sweden. It's not popular at all, but not big. So it's football, hockey, and then handball.
I read in Wikipedia, maybe you should not believe everything that you read on Wikipedia, but I read that wrestling is pretty big in Georgia and Moldova. Is this true?
Yeah, that is true. Like sports that really require a lot of physical power, like weightlifting and wrestling and other stuff like that, they are pretty popular in Georgia because like the history of Georgia is very old, and basically in the entire history is Georgia had to always defend itself from the countries around it, like Russia and other countries, because it was a small but a beautiful country. People had to stay strong, and it's like in Georgian nature that you have to be strong and really masculine and like defend what you love and your country and like be really patriotic. So especially big men, like they stay really strong and they like enjoy fighting and wrestling and other stuff like that, because like in Georgia those are really popular.
In Moldova also, wrestling, judo, and rowing are the three most popular and developed sports in our country. Wrestling because Moldovan people, especially men, are often built up really strong, really like not that tall, not like in Denmark or like Norway, but the ideal size, shape, proportion for wrestling. And we have a lot of talented athletes in the sports. Judo also, and rowing, I don't know why rowing, but that's it, that's the fact.
How is the supporting culture in our three different countries? Esther, you are very like informed on this.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I've been to not about like only football, I would say. I've never been to a wrestling game. I've seen rowing though, but that was in England, and there they have a very good and like boozy supporter culture with a lot of people watching the rowing. But in football in Sweden, I would say it's quite developed. It's always like the men's league is really like a lot of international players are impressed with the supporters and the supporter culture, with a lot of tifo and a lot of singing throughout the games. It's really, that's a part of the Swedish football culture. And even though our league isn't that good compared to other leagues in Europe, so it's really a good supporter culture, I would say, and a very active one on the men's side. And it's growing very fast on the women's side as well. So that's really fun to see. Still growing a bit too slow, I think. But, you know, all process is good process, I guess.
Esther, how come that you felt the need to create your own supporter culture or supporter group?
Well, I think it's a big difference between men and women football in general, because it's, and you know, team sports. When it's an individual sport, it's usually more equal between the sexes. But in team sports, women are always, you know, there's less money, there's less people, there's a worse, like not enough facilities, and you get worse at times at different stadiums and stuff. So it's a big injustice in that. And I've been to, like, I've always gone and watched football, and I've always watched both men and women, but I've always enjoyed the men's games more because of the feeling in the stands and the collectivity, and like that you're part of a bigger group and stuff, and that you get to scream and sing and hold up signs, and like you're part of something bigger. But I also I enjoy watching the women's game much more because it's, I think, pure and not as affected by, you know, the big money in big sports and stuff. So it's always so, and I wanted, I'm a feminist, I want things to be equal, and I wanted it to be more fun to watch women's games. So it was really just quite selfish of me to start this, because I wanted it to be more fun for me to go watch games. So that's why I started my supporter group for the female national team in football in Sweden. So to create a better atmosphere, and also that was one aspect of it, to like make it more fun for me to watch football. But also I wanted to, these players, they're so amazing. I think they personally, I think they deserve all the best, and they're just, amazing people on the field, but also off the field. And they do great jobs with equality, with LGBTQ rights. And they're really, clever people, which I sometimes feel like we lack in the men's game. But so I really wanted to for them to have it all. And I know, we've all played sports. It's always more fun when somebody's watching and somebody's cheering. So I really wanted to give them that. So I think that's why we started it, but also, mostly just to have more fun watching the games.
I think that's a very interesting aspect as well about sports, like gender and inclusivity. They often, as you say, Estrid, there's often a talk about huge difference between men's sports, who get all the attention, all the money, and women's sports, who sometimes are a lot better than the men, but get a lot less attention. But how do you feel in Moldova and Georgia? Is this also a big problem, or what do you think?
I generally think that in basically all of the other countries and also Georgia, women get less respected in sports than men. And this really isn't the fault of younger generations. It's sports has been coming before Christ, and sports has been the Olympic Games for centuries now. And coming from that time, men and women weren't equal. And these days, people do try to make everything equal, but these old stereotypes and things, they're just they don't really leave. I do think that not only in several countries, it's mostly a global problem that women get more disrespected in sports. But then again, it's more about what sports you're playing, because there are sports that only women participate in, and there is very minimal men who play in it. So there are some sports that are only meant for women, and men don't really play it.
Yeah, and I also think there's an interesting aspect where it gets kind of political, because in especially football, women's football is it was bigger than the men's game during the 20s, the 1920s, 100 years ago in England. Women's football was huge, and then they banned it, and for over 50 years women weren't allowed to play football. And I think that's also talking about the historical aspect of it. I think you need to kind of it's not only that we're unequal in many aspects of life. There's actually been a ban for women to play sports. But I also think it's very interesting, in Sweden, for example, both cross-country skiing, biathlon, downhill skiing, all of these individual sports where women get as much or not even more respect, because they're better right now. We get all the medals in cross-country skiing from women right now, and they get more money because they get better sponsors. And I think that it's very a very interesting aspect of it is that being an individual athlete as a woman is not that bad, at least not in Sweden in many sports. But as soon as you start with the team sports, you lose so much respect and money, especially money. So I think that's also very interesting. How is it, Anna, in shooting? It feels like a very male-dominated sport. Is that correct or no?
Actually, no, it's not male-dominated, as you might think. If you're talking about Moldova, than here. I think we even have more female shooters, both like girls, women, teenagers, women that practice our sport. I don't know why, but I think, yeah, I think that we're more. If you're talking about sports in Moldova in general, then I would say that here the gender inequality is not that noticed, not that felt as it may be in other communities. But if we're talking worldwide, then yeah, of course there is gender inequality. And the most unfair part of it is that women's game, especially the team ones, are often much more harder, much more difficult from both psychological and technical way. For example, in volleyball, women's game may be even more interesting to watch because women don't have that much strength and power as men. They can't hit the ball with that power as men do. So they need to come up with more technical side, with more technical solutions for their game. And there are also many examples of that. I think in football, it's pretty much the same. The women's team must come up with some technical solutions for the game. They must think of the technical aspects more than think of the strength aspects, for example.
I totally agree. And I also feel like this is not an issue in most sports, but in football, it's like so over commercialized that you see like players that you're like, do you even want to be here? Or are you just doing this for the money? It's on the men's side. And that's why I think the women's side is also much more interesting with that aspect because there's not as much money in it. And I think that's like sane. I think they should get a bit more, but mostly I think that the men should get less. And like, what does it do to the sport when people go to leagues in undemocratic countries just to like make money and play in teams where they're way too good for just to earn more money or get a good sponsorship deal? And yeah, I feel like football kind of lost its soul a bit on the men's side. And like you don't have that loyalty to a team anymore. You just have a loyalty to the money. And so that's another aspect, but also the technical side that I feel like makes the women's game more interesting to watch.
I think that's a very interesting and very poignant question. It's like, how far can you separate the sports, who we all love and think it's a big part of our lives, and the politics and economics around it? Can you separate politics from sports?
For me, I really can't connect sports with politics because I don't really care that much about politics, and for me they are just like two completely different things. Like politics is politics and sport is sports. Like maybe the discussions that come with sports and come with politics, maybe they can be a little bit like each other, but politics is something that decides what happens to the future of the country, and sports is like it represents the country and what the team does for the country. And I think that politics and sports are like two absolutely different things.
And I'm the complete opposite. Well, I think like, everything you do is political. And like every choice you make in life is both affected by politics and can affect the politics. So for me, sport is like, I think it's very difficult to separate. It's like sports is functioning in a society, and that society is affected by politics and how much sports costs, what sports are available for you. All of that is for me politics, and where we decide to have the competitions, who get to participate, should Russian athletes be welcome in the Olympics or not, should, like all of that for me is very political. For me, the gender part of it is always present as well, which is also politics for me. So, but I know that like people disagree on this, but for me it's very, yeah, I'm very grounded that in my view that like everything is politics more or less. And I definitely think sport can be very political.
I would say that I'm kind of neutral about this topic. So sports unites people. Sport unites all people around the globe that are watching it, that are playing it, that are supporting it. And that's why during ancient Olympic Games, all wars were getting stopped, because no war should be during Olympic Games. But can sport be separated from politics and economics? Of course, no. It's not even possible, especially in a modern world. And I think it's from both sides, both sad and both kind of positive for the athletes from the economical point of view.
And it can also, like you said, it can also be such a unionizing thing. Like sports can really bring people together, and it's a very beautiful. Like you can find friends from all over the world in the love, like that you share the love for the same game. And I think that is very like a great way to start a friendship.
You know what was the quote for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games? Stronger together.
Stronger
it was
together.
The main words that were heard all around that Olympics, and it explains so much about sport. It's just the sense, the soul of the sport. We are stronger together.
About like unionizing and stuff like that, and sports healing power, if you will. I'm gonna throw out a very controversial question right now, but you talked about, Estrid, about the exclusion from the Russians from the Olympics. What do we think about that? Should we separate athletes from their country, or can't we do that? Is this an overreaction or a valid political response? What do you think?
For me, like sports is sports, and it shouldn't be defined where you come from, because if you play sports, you play sports, and anything other than that is just your backstory and isn't anything that should be important in that particular moment when you're playing sports. That's why like the NVL exists, because countries could play against each other. And even in Georgia, there are many players who come from abroad to play for Georgian teams. And I think that countries shouldn't really matter and aren't really important when it comes to sports.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer with the Russian athletes. Like they're doing they're in the middle of a war, like an unprovoked war against Ukraine. And Russia builds a lot of its national spirit on sports and the medals they bring home. So it's an important part of the propaganda, which I think makes it harder, because I generally believe that you shouldn't be punished for where you're from. And I think that's important, like generally in life, that like you can't really choose where you're born. And it's quite a lot to ask these athletes to take like a stand for Ukraine, because, we don't know what's going to happen to their families and all of that. So it's not like, well, you can compete, but only if you're against the war. I think that's also a lot to ask. But then also, I don't like the idea that the Olympics is going to be a part of the regime's propaganda. And so I think it's really, really difficult. And maybe like competing under a neutral flag is a good compromise, but I really don't know. I'm really perplexed about this question, and it's not very common that I don't have an opinion. But in this question, I haven't made up my mind about it. I think it's really, really difficult, and it's also, Anna, you're trying to get into the Olympics, you put your life into it. And should you like not be able to do what you've like been working on for like your entire life because you happen to come from a country that's right now invading another country? I don't know. I feel like it's a lot to punish someone for that. But also, yeah, it's a really difficult question.
I've said it before and I say it again. Athletes have nothing to do with their country policy. Athletes do not take responsibility for their country's action. What have to do athletes with the choices of their government? These are things that can even be connected. Just try to think of that for one moment. How is the thing that Estrid was talking about right now? How do the athletes feel Russian athletes feel right now when they, most of them who are preparing for the Olympic Games, when they can't even participate. For example, if we're talking about non-existence of the neutral flag, for example, they're banned from participation. And in history were such stories like that. So, for example, they're banned completely. Do you even imagine how the athletes feel inside? I don't even want to think about it because it makes me feel very sad for the athletes. Because I know personally, I have some Russian friends that are athletes and they are competing. And for example, in my sport in shooting, there is this one very strong, really strong, maybe even the strongest woman shooter from Russia. And I haven't heard of her since the moment of the war started. And of course, she's my opponent. I will be competing against her one day. I was competing against her at the Tokyo Olympics, and I should be happy that I won't probably have a chance to compete with her at the nearest competitions. But I do not feel that way at all. That is making me sad, or quite the opposite. And if you're talking about the neutral flag, then trust me, for the athletes, it doesn't matter at all to compete under the neutral flag of the NOC, National Olympic Committee, or under the country's flag. Either ways, it's a representation of the country. And either ways, it evokes in the athletes the feeling of love in front of their country. How can they not love their own country if they were born there? It has nothing to do with politics. And I think that a lot of athletes that have any opinion at all about the war, they feel sad about it, especially sad, not like angry or abandoned, but sad that they probably won't have possibility to compete at not only on the Olympics, but in any other competitions in the way that they were competing in the past. It's like the war was this point where nobody from other countries, especially those who don't support war at all, that are categorically to that, they won't accept Russian athletes no more. I can't even imagine how after the war goes, I hope as soon as possible, after all of this passes, I don't even know how the Russian athletes will be seen by other countries. They will be seen as villains, as the enemies for the next century, I think, or even more. And that's making me really sad about it. That's all I can say.
Understand, and that's very valid opinion.
I agree with Dana completely because it is not their fault that the war started. If you live in a country which dominates over other countries in political matters, it wasn't the particular person's decision for the country to start war, and they have no control over it. They can't really do anything about it, and only because of the fact that they were born there changed the whole image of there. And all of these years they worked so hard to be the best at these sports, and now because of their country's political decisions they are seen as bad people. So I do think that it is quite unfair, because if your country's politics is bad, that doesn't mean that you yourself are a bad person.
Thank you so much, guys. It's very, very cool that we have so many different opinions. But I think it's time that we round up the discussion, and we can do that by looking to the future. And I want to ask you, is there any sport-related events or activities that you look forward to in the future? Andrea?
I am looking forward to one thing, and there is a really great castle, like a sports castle in my city, which has been locked down for like 3 or 4 years. It has never been used before, but it is like a top level indoor court. So now after the games are done, they are planning on opening that court for us to exercise in. And I think that will be absolutely wonderful, that we'll have a much better and stable court for us to practice in.
Estrid?
Yeah, I look at like, I always have many sport activities to look forward to. Next weekend, I'm going myself cross country skiing with my family, which I'm very excited about. But then this spring, it's 2 home games before the World Cup in New Zealand and Australia that I'm really looking forward to create a great atmosphere for our team, to give them a great send off to Down Under, where I unfortunately can't go. So I'm really looking forward to these 2 games and to have a huge comeback after COVID to really fill up the stands and create the best atmosphere for them.
Well, I'm looking forward to Junior World Cup this year. It will be held in May in Germany, in a small mountain German town called named Zul. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly in English. These may be my favorite competitions from all. I don't know why, just the atmosphere there, it brings me such joy, such happiness. So I'm really looking forward to compete there.
Wow, that sounds very nice and very cool. What I'm looking forward to is not as grand, but my friend found 2 free coupon tickets for kickboxing. So we're gonna do a free kickboxing lesson next week, which I'm very excited for. Thank you so much to Andrea, Anna and Estrid for participating. It's been a wonderful discussion. You've been listening to Echolocation podcast. My name is Samuel Rivera, and I hope you'll tune in soon again. Thank you.